In 30 years of Family Feud history, Steve Harvey had never done this. He stopped the show, put down his microphone, and embraced the woman he had just met. The studio audience froze. The cameras kept rolling. And in that moment, everyone watching understood they were witnessing something far beyond a game show. But to understand why Steve Harvey broke every protocol that day, we need to go back to the moment it all started. To a question that seemed simple. To an answer that shattered everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon taping at the Family Feud studio in Atlanta. The energy was electric, as it always was. Two families stood on opposite sides of the stage, ready to compete for the $20,000 grand prize. On the left, the Morrison family from Nashville. On the right, the Patterson family from Detroit. Steve Harvey walked onto the stage with his signature swagger, adjusting his purple suit jacket and flashing that $1 million smile. The audience erupted in applause. This was his element. For over a decade, he had mastered the art of turning a simple game show into something magical, connecting with contestants in ways that made millions of viewers feel like they were right there in the studio. The Morrison family had already won the first 2 rounds. They were confident, laughing, celebrating each correct answer with choreographed dance moves. The Patterson family, however, seemed different. Quieter. More reserved. At the center of their lineup stood Dorothy Patterson, a 78-year-old woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a floral blouse and a gentle smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Subscribe and leave a comment because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. All right, Patterson family, let's get you on the board, Steve said, walking toward their podium with his trademark energy. Dorothy, you're up. How you doing today? I'm blessed, Steve. Just blessed to be here, Dorothy replied softly. Her voice carried a weight that Steve, after years of reading people, immediately recognized. This wasn't the usual contestant excitement. This was something else. The question appeared on the board. Name something a brother does for his sister that shows he truly loves her. It was a softball question. The kind designed to get heartwarming, sometimes funny answers. Protects her from bullies. Teaches her to drive. Scares away bad boyfriends. Simple. Wholesome. Safe. Steve looked at Dorothy, expecting a quick answer so they could keep the energy going. But Dorothy stood there, microphone trembling slightly in her hand, staring at the board with an expression that stopped Steve mid-breath. The studio, which seconds ago buzzed with energy, fell into an unexpected silence. Take your time, Dorothy, Steve said, his voice softer now. Something in his gut told him this wasn't just about the game anymore. Dorothy closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were glistening with tears. My brother, she began, her voice cracking. My brother gave me his kidney 42 years ago when I was dying. The doctor said I had 3 months to live. He didn't hesitate. Not for a second. The audience gasped. Steve Harvey's smile faded, replaced by something raw and real. He gave me 42 extra years, Steve. 42 years to watch my children grow. To meet my grandchildren. To live. Dorothy's voice broke completely now. And last month, he passed away from complications. I never got to thank him enough. I never got to tell him that every single day of these 42 years I thought of him. Every single day. Steve stopped mid-joke. The entire studio froze. Time seemed to suspend in that moment. The game board behind them flashed its colors, but no one was looking at it anymore. The cameras zoomed in, capturing something rarely seen on television, pure, unscripted human emotion in its rawest form. Steve Harvey, the man known for quick comebacks and infectious laughter, stood completely still. His eyes welled up. His jaw tightened. For 5 full seconds he said nothing, an eternity in television time. Then he did something no one expected. He walked away from his podium. Straight toward Dorothy. The producers in the control room started signaling to keep the show moving, but Steve wasn't looking at them. He wasn't looking at the cameras. He was looking at Dorothy Patterson, and in her eyes, he saw something that connected to a part of his own story he rarely shared publicly. Dorothy, Steve said, his voice thick with emotion. "Come here." He opened his arms, and Dorothy stepped forward. In front of millions of viewers, in the middle of a game show designed for laughs and prizes, Steve Harvey embraced this woman he had just met as if she were family. The audience didn't make a sound. Some were crying. Others had their hands over their hearts. But what happened next is what no one saw coming. Behind the scenes, Steve made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. When Steve finally pulled back from the embrace, he didn't return to his podium. Instead, he turned to the audience and said, "We're going to take a moment here. This is more important than any game." The producers were frantic. They had a schedule. Commercial breaks were timed. But Steve Harvey, in that moment, made a choice that redefined what Family Feud could be. He turned to Dorothy's family standing behind her. "Tell me about him. Tell me about your brother." Dorothy's younger sister, Marie, stepped forward. "His name was James. James Patterson. And everything Dorothy said is true, but there's more." Marie's voice was steady but filled with emotion. "When James gave Dorothy his kidney, he was told there could be complications down the road. The doctors warned him. But he said, 'She's my sister. I'd do it 1,000 times.' After the surgery," Marie continued, "James never complained. Not once. Even when he started having health issues years later, he would always say it was worth it. He'd see Dorothy at family gatherings with her kids, her grandkids, and he'd smile and say, 'Best decision I ever made.'" Steve Harvey listened, his hand covering his mouth, fighting back tears. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Then Steve did something else unexpected. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his personal business card. Not a show card. His personal contact information. "Dorothy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I want you to have this. Because what your brother did, that's not just love. That's legacy. And I want you to know that his story, your story, it matters. It matters more than you know." But Steve wasn't done. He turned to face the camera directly, breaking the fourth wall in a way he had never done before on Family Feud. "Everybody watching right now, listen to me," Steve said, his voice gaining strength. "We spend so much time chasing things that don't matter. Money, fame, prizes. But what James Patterson did, that's what matters. That's what love looks like. Real love. Sacrificial love. The kind that doesn't expect anything back." The camera captured something in Steve's eyes that long-time viewers recognized but rarely saw. This wasn't just about Dorothy and James. This was personal. Years earlier, Steve Harvey had lost his own father, Jesse Harvey, the man who had sacrificed everything to give Steve and his siblings a better life. Jesse had worked as a coal miner, a boxer, a carpet cleaner, anything to keep his family afloat. He never got to see Steve's massive success, never got to see his son become one of the most recognizable faces on television. In Dorothy's story, Steve saw his own. In James Patterson's sacrifice, he saw his father's. "Dorothy," Steve said, turning back to her, "your brother knew. Trust me, he knew. Every time he saw you smile, every time he saw you hug your grandkids, he knew. That was his thank you. That was enough. But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming." Steve Harvey took off his jacket. His signature purple suit jacket that cost thousands of dollars. He draped it over Dorothy's shoulders. "This is for James," Steve said simply. "You wear this today, and you remember that his love is still covering you. Still protecting you. Still keeping you warm." The audience erupted. Not in applause, but in a standing ovation mixed with tears and overwhelming emotion. The Morrison family, the competing family who should have been focused on winning, crossed the stage and embraced the Patterson family. Strangers holding strangers. Competitors becoming community. The cameras captured it all. The control room had given up trying to maintain schedule. The producers knew they were witnessing something that transcended television. Steve Harvey stood in the middle of the stage in his dress shirt and tie, watching this unfold, and for a moment he let himself cry. Not the careful, controlled emotion of a performer. Real tears. The kind that come from a place of deep recognition and shared humanity. Dorothy Patterson clutched Steve's jacket around her shoulders like a sacred garment. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me say his name. Thank you for letting James matter." "He always mattered, Dorothy," Steve replied. "And now millions of people know it." The game resumed eventually, but no one cared about the score anymore. The Patterson family ended up losing the round, but they won something far more valuable. They won the chance to honor James Patterson in front of the world. They won the moment to transform their grief into testimony. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the show wrapped, Steve Harvey did something else that wasn't captured on camera. He gathered the entire Patterson family in his dressing room. He spent 2 hours with them, listening to more stories about James, looking at photos they had on their phones, laughing and crying with them. He told them about his own father, about the sacrifices Jesse Harvey had made, about the guilt he sometimes felt for not being able to give back everything his father had given him. "But your brother," Steve told Dorothy's family. "James got to see his gift at work every single day you all were together. That's rare. That's special. Most people who make sacrifices like that never get to see the fruit. James did. He saw you thrive, Dorothy. He saw his nieces and nephews grow up with their mother. He saw it all. That's a gift too." The episode that aired 3 weeks later became the most watched Family Feud episode in the show's history. Not because of game drama or funny answers, but because of that moment. That genuine, unscripted, human moment when Steve Harvey chose connection over content, when he chose to honor a sacrifice over maintaining a schedule. The jacket Dorothy wore that day was never returned. Steve told her to keep it. "Every time you wear it, you remember that love like that never dies. It just changes form." 2 months after the episode aired, Steve Harvey established the James Patterson Memorial Fund, a charity dedicated to helping families with medical expenses related to organ donation. He funded it personally with a 7-figure donation and used his platform to encourage others to become organ donors. In interviews, when asked why he did it, Steve always gave the same answer. "Because James Patterson reminded me what matters. And Dorothy reminded me that the greatest gift we can give is not what we can afford, but what we can't afford not to give." The purple jacket still hangs in Dorothy Patterson's closet in Detroit. She wears it to family gatherings, to church, to her grandchildren's graduations. And every time she puts it on, she tells the story of the day Steve Harvey stopped a game show to honor her brother's sacrifice. But the jacket is more than fabric now. It's a symbol. A reminder that sometimes the most important thing we can do is stop, listen, and acknowledge the sacred in the ordinary. That behind every contestant, every audience member, every person we pass on the street, there's a story of sacrifice, of love, of loss that deserves to be witnessed. Steve Harvey learned something that day too. That all his success, all his fame, all his achievements pale in comparison to the simple act of seeing someone, really seeing them, and honoring what they carry. Years later in his memoir, Steve would write about that day. "I've made people laugh for decades. That's my job. But the day I made room for Dorothy Patterson to honor her brother James, that's the day I understood what my platform was really for. Not just entertainment, but elevation. Not just distraction, but dignity." The episode continues to circulate on social media. Clips of Steve embracing Dorothy, of him giving her his jacket, of the audience standing in unified emotion, they're shared millions of times with captions like, "This is what humanity looks like," and "Steve Harvey showing us what really matters." But perhaps the most powerful part of the story is the ripple effect it created. After the episode aired, thousands of people registered to become organ donors. Families reached out to share their own stories of sacrifice. Brothers called sisters. Parents called children. Old wounds were addressed. Gratitude was expressed. One man wrote to the show, "I watched Steve stop everything to honor that woman's brother, and I realized I've never properly thanked my own sister for what she did for our family. I called her for the first time in 5 years. We cried together. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you, James Patterson. That's the legacy. Not a game show moment, but a catalyst for healing, for recognition, for people to stop and honor the sacrifices that surround them every day. James Patterson never became famous. He never sought recognition. He simply loved his sister enough to give her tomorrow. And because Steve Harvey chose to stop, to listen, to honor that love, James's sacrifice will never be forgotten. Sometimes the greatest moments happen when we break the rules. When we choose people over protocol. When we let love interrupt the schedule. That day in the Family Feud studio, Steve Harvey didn't just host a show. He held space for something sacred. And in doing so, he reminded all of us what it means to truly see each other.